Most women are taught to fear the dark, both the gathering dusk outside their window and the quiet stirrings within their own hearts. They are handed a lantern of acceptable traits, kindness, compliance, grace, and instructed to illuminate only those parts of themselves, casting the rest into a deep and forgotten well. But what if that exiled darkness is not a monster to be chained, but the very source of your power, your authenticity, your complete self? This is the profound, unsettling question at the heart of Carl Jung's concept of the shadow, that hidden repository of everything we have been taught to disown. To fear this shadow is not a sign of purity. It is a symptom of being afraid of your own true, undivided nature. The shadow is not merely a collection of negative impulses. It is the unconscious totality of all that you are, but refuse to acknowledge. It holds your raw anger, your fierce pride, your unbridled sensuality, your sharp-edged ambition, the very qualities that society, and often our own conditioning, label as unfeminine or too much. When a woman shuns this shadow, she does not make it disappear. She merely forces it to operate from the basement of her psyche, where it manifests in more insidious ways, as unexplained anxiety, as harsh projections onto other women, as a haunting sense of being incomplete, a ghost in your own life. You may believe you are running from a monster, but you are, in fact, running from the wholeness that whispers your true name. The ego, the conscious sense of I, builds a fortress of light, but it is a fortress under constant siege by the very parts it has banished. This inner civil war drains vitality, leaving a woman feeling fragmented, perpetually performing a role rather than inhabiting her being. The path to empowerment, then, is not about strengthening the fortress walls, but about having the courage to descend into the cellar with a curious heart, to meet what you have feared most, and to discover that it was never your enemy, but your forgotten kin. Before we descend further into this crucial exploration, if these ideas resonate with you, if you feel a pull towards understanding the deeper currents of your psyche, consider supporting this channel. Welcome to the Library of Thoughts, a sanctuary for those brave enough to explore the architecture of their own minds. Subscribe to continue this journey with us. This initial act of fearing the shadow as a primal self-betrayal, it is the internalization of 1,000 external voices that dictated what a woman should be. But here is the paradoxical truth that Stoic philosophy echoes across millennia. What you resist persists. Seneca warned of the folly of being in dread of things that are not present, of allowing phantoms of the mind to hold more power than present reality. Your shadow is such a phantom only because you have refused to bring it into the light of your conscious awareness. The fear is not of the shadow itself, but of the seismic shift its integration would cause in your carefully constructed identity. It is the fear of the authentic power that awaits on the other side of that acknowledgement. A power that demands responsibility and obliterates the comfortable victimhood of the unexamined life. The journey toward the shadow begins not with a bold charge into the darkness, but with a quiet, unsettling observation of the light. It starts by noticing the cracks in the persona, the polished mask worn for the world. A woman might pride herself on her boundless patience, yet find herself seething with a corrosive resentment when others inevitably take advantage. She may cultivate an image of effortless strength, only to be ambushed by waves of a dependency so profound it terrifies her. These are not failures of character. They are the shadow's polite, yet persistent, knock at the door. It speaks through the projections she casts onto others. The intense dislike for a woman she deems dramatic or aggressive, mirroring the unexpressed drama and aggression within herself. It whispers in the attractions that confuse her, the pull toward individuals who embody the very wildness she has suppressed, as if her soul is trying to reclaim its missing pieces through another. This is the psyche's intelligent, if convoluted, method of self-correction. To ignore these signals is to live a life of quiet dissonance where the public script and the private longing are written in opposing languages. The ego, tasked with maintaining the status quo, will rationalize the disconnect. It will label the emerging shadow content as toxic or negative, further pushing it down. But this is akin to trying to hold a beach ball underwater. The exertion is constant, draining, and eventually the ball will burst to the surface with uncontrollable force. This is the origin of the emotional explosion that seems to come from nowhere. The regrettable words spoken in a moment of heated pressure. It is not a new malice born in an instant, but the accumulated voice of the banished self, finally finding a crack through which to scream. Marcus Aurelius wrote of the importance of examining the impressions that come to us, of not being carried away by them. This Stoic practice is the very essence of shadow work. To observe the rising irritation, the spike of envy, the flicker of contempt without immediate judgment or action. To simply ask with detached curiosity, what part of me feels so threatened? What unhealed wound does this touch? This process requires a courage far greater than any external battle, for it is the courage of radical self-honesty. It is to sit in the silent chamber of your own heart and acknowledge the full spectrum of your humanity. You are not only the nurturing caregiver, but also the being who needs to be cared for, who possesses a rightful selfishness. You are not only the serene peacemaker, but also the warrior who harbors a righteous anger. To deny this is to fragment your soul. The goal is not to become the shadow, to let anger or pride reign supreme, but to acknowledge its existence, to understand its origin, and to integrate its energy. The shadow holds vital life force, the passion that fuels creation, the boundaries that protect your spirit, the instinct that guides your path. By welcoming it, you are not becoming a monster. You are becoming whole. You are trading a fragile, perfect mask for a resilient, authentic self. The integration of the shadow is an alchemical process, a slow, deliberate turning of leaden, hidden aspects into the gold of conscious power. It begins with the difficult art of withdrawing projections. When a woman feels a sharp, irrational reaction to someone, a co-worker's blatant ambition, a friend's need for constant attention, she is often looking into a funhouse mirror reflecting a distorted image of her own disowned self. That fierce judgment is a beacon, pointing directly toward a part of her own psyche that has been deemed unacceptable. The work is to turn that judgment inward, not with self-flagellation, but with the discerning eye of an archaeologist, uncovering a lost artifact. The question shifts from how can she be so demanding to where in my life have I forbidden myself from asking for what I truly need. This is the moment the mirror clears and the true reflection begins to emerge. This reclamation is not a passive event. It is an active, often painful, rewriting of one's internal narrative. For so long, the ego has been the sole author, writing a story of goodness and light, editing out any conflicting chapters. Now, the shadow demands a co-author credit. It insists that the story include the rage that forged resilience, the envy that clarified desire, the selfishness that protects sacred boundaries. This is where modern trauma psychology aligns with ancient wisdom. The unexpressed emotions and forbidden needs of the past do not vanish. They fossilize within the nervous system, creating patterns of reaction and attachment that play out endlessly until they are witnessed with compassion. To acknowledge the shadow is to finally listen to the wounded child who learned to hide her anger to feel safe, to honor the young woman who buried her ambition to be loved. You are not condoning negative behaviors. You are validating the raw, unmet needs that fueled them, and in doing so, you drain them of their compulsive power. This is the path of individuation that Jung spoke of, the journey toward becoming the unique, indivisible individual you are meant to be, distinct from the collective expectations imposed upon you. It is a journey from fragmentation to coherence. A woman who does this work stops being a collection of reactions and begins to operate from a solid, internal center. The opinions of others lose their sting because her self-worth is no longer contingent on maintaining a spotless persona. She understands that her wholeness encompasses both light and dark, and in that acceptance, she finds a terrifying and magnificent freedom. The Stoic ideal of finding freedom within one's own mind is achieved not by suppressing the inner world, but by embracing its totality. As Epictetus taught, we cannot choose our external circumstances, but we can always choose our responses. This power of choice becomes truly available only when we are no longer puppeteered by the unconscious shadows we refuse to face. This newfound coherence, born from the integration of the shadow, radically transforms a woman's relationship with the world, particularly in the realm of love and attraction. For it is in our most intimate connections that our unconscious projections are most vividly and painfully enacted. A woman who fears her own power will inevitably be drawn to partners who either dominate her, mirroring her internal suppression, or who are so passive they force her power to the surface in distorted, controlling ways. She is caught in a dance of pursuit and withdrawal, not with another person, but with the disowned aspects of her own soul. The unavailable man is a perfect screen upon which to project her own fear of true availability. The chaotic man mirrors her own unintegrated inner turmoil. These relationships are not random misfortunes, but precise, if painful, assignments from the psyche, designed to force a confrontation with the self. When she begins to reclaim her shadow, the entire dynamic shifts. The compulsive attraction to certain types dissolves, because the internal void those types once filled is now being nourished from within. She no longer seeks a partner to complete her, for she is moving toward her own completion. This does not make her less loving. It makes her love more authentic and less needy. She is no longer a beggar for validation, but a sovereign being capable of sharing from a place of abundance. Her boundaries, forged from the integrated strength of her once repressed anger and pride, become non-negotiable expressions of self-respect, not walls built from fear. She can say no with clarity, not as an act of aggression, but as an affirmation of her own worth. This is the foundation of truly adult love, a meeting of two whole beings, not a frantic grasping of two halves, trying to form a fragile whole. This sovereignty alters the very frequency of her presence. There is a quiet authority that replaces the need for external approval, a magnetic stillness that is far more powerful than any performative charm. People, and especially potential partners, respond to this internal shift at an instinctual level. They are drawn to the integrity, the lack of manipulation, the profound sense of safety that comes from someone who is no longer at war with themselves. The games of push and pull lose their allure, for she is no longer trying to win a prize, but to engage in a meaningful exchange. Her discernment sharpens. She can see others more clearly, unobscured by the fog of her own projections. She is no longer attracted to potential, but to presence, not to the fantasy of who someone could be, but to the reality of who they are. In this space, she is not chosen, she chooses, and her choice is rooted not in lack, but in a deep, unwavering recognition of alignment. Yet this path of descent and reclamation is not a linear ascent into perpetual light. It is a cyclical process, a spiral where old shadows, once thought integrated, re-emerge in more subtle and sophisticated forms for further examination. The initial confrontation with the shadows, often with its most dramatic archetypes, the raging fury, the seductive temptress. But as these are welcomed, the psyche reveals deeper, more nuanced layers of the unconscious. A woman may have made peace with her ambition, only to be confronted with a more insidious shadow of unworthiness, a deep-seated belief that she does not truly deserve the power she has claimed. She may have integrated her assertiveness, yet find herself facing a shadow of vulnerability so profound it threatens to unravel her. This is not a failure of the work, it is the work deepening. This is where the Stoic practice of amor fati, the love of one's fate, becomes essential. It is the conscious embrace of every facet of the journey, including the reappearance of the darkness. To love one's fate is to understand that each return to the Shadowlands is not a punishment, but an invitation to greater depth, resilience, and compassion. It is to see these cycles not as a wheel of suffering, but as the very process of soul-making. Marcus Aurelius meditated on the logos of the universe, the rational principle that orders all things. In the personal psyche, this logos is the drive toward wholeness. The shadow's recurring appearance is not a flaw in the system, but its intelligent, persistent operation. It will continue to present lessons until they are fully learned, until the separation between the conscious self and the unconscious self is healed. The courage required here shifts from the dramatic bravery of the initial descent to the quiet, daily perseverance of mindfulness. It is the courage to catch the micro-expressions of the shadow in the flow of daily life, the slight pang of jealousy at a friend's success, the subtle desire to manipulate a situation to feel secure, the fleeting judgment of another's life choices. Instead of brushing these moments aside as insignificant, the woman on the path of individuation pauses. She holds the feeling without identification, asking, "What is this? Where does it live in my body? What story is it telling?" This moment of pause is a radical act of sovereignty. It breaks the automaticity of the ego's defenses and allows for a conscious choice. In that space between stimulus and response, as Viktor Frankl wrote, lies our growth and our freedom. This is the practical, moment-to-moment application of shadow work, the relentless, compassionate commitment to seeing oneself truly, not as one wishes to be, but as one actually is in every fleeting thought and feeling. As this conscious relationship with the inner world deepens, a profound transformation occurs in a woman's relationship with the very concept of darkness itself. The shadow is no longer a terrifying adversary to be battled, but a vital, creative partner. It becomes the rich, fertile soil from which her most authentic expressions can grow. The pain she has integrated becomes a source of profound empathy. The anger she has acknowledged transforms into the unwavering energy that protects her peace. The desires she once buried now serve as a compass, guiding her toward a life that is truly her own. This is the alchemical completion, the mysterium coniunctionis, the sacred marriage of conscious and unconscious within the individual. The light of awareness no longer fears the dark. It learns to see by its subtle, revealing wisdom. This inner union creates a state of emotional independence that is the ultimate form of empowerment. Her sense of value, her purpose, her joy are no longer commodities to be extracted from the external world, from a partner's praise, a society's approval, or the achievement of certain milestones. They become intrinsic qualities, emanating from the core of her integrated being. This is the embodiment of the Stoic ideal of finding one's fortress within. Seneca advised to retreat into oneself, for there one would find a source of reliable goodness. For the woman who has befriended her shadow, this retreat is not an escape from the world, but a return to her source of power. From this centered place, she can engage with the world without being enslaved by it. She can love without losing herself. She can strive without attaching her worth to the outcome. This is the birth of what could be called unshakable worth. It is not an inflated ego, a brittle pride that can be shattered by criticism. It is a deep, quiet knowing that her value is inherent and non-negotiable, precisely because it encompasses the totality of her experience, the triumphs and the failures, the kindness and the jealousy, the strength and the fragility. She no longer seeks to be a flawless statue on a pedestal, for she understands that her humanity, in all its messy, contradictory glory, is her greatest asset. This self-knowledge allows her to navigate the world with a new kind of grace. She can receive feedback without crumbling, for her identity is not threatened. She can endure loss without being annihilated, for her wholeness is not external. She has become a self-contained universe, complex and vast, capable of weathering any storm because she is no longer at war with her own atmosphere. The final stage of this journey is not an arrival at a static destination, but a fundamental shift into a state of continuous becoming. The integrated woman understands that the self is not a fixed entity to be perfected, but a dynamic, flowing process. She has made a home for the contradictions within her, allowing them to coexist without the desperate need for a false, premature resolution. This inner peace is not the absence of conflict, but the capacity to hold conflict without being torn apart. It is the equanimity that Marcus Aurelius sought, a harmony achieved not by silencing the orchestra of the psyche, but by learning to appreciate the complex, sometimes dissonant, music it plays. She moves through the world with a profound sense of detachment, not cold indifference, but a liberated engagement where her inner peace is not contingent on external circumstances. This is the essence of emotional and spiritual freedom. She is no longer a prisoner of her past conditioning, a puppet of her reactive patterns, or a beggar for external validation. Her life becomes an expression of conscious choice, rooted in the deep self-knowledge forged in the shadows. The opinions of others, the fluctuations of fortune, the behaviors of partners, these things may touch her, but they cannot define her. She has encountered the darkest corners of her own soul and has returned not with scars, but with sovereignty. The fear that once governed her choices, fear of abandonment, of rejection, of not being enough, loses its power because she has found herself, and that is enough. She has looked into the abyss and discovered that the abyss was, in fact, her own unacknowledged depth. From this place of wholeness, her entire mode of relating to love and life transforms. The frantic energy of chasing, of proving, of securing evaporates. It is replaced by a magnetic, calm presence. She understands that a true partnership is not about finding someone to fill her voids, but about choosing someone with whom to share her abundance. She does not seek a completion, but a communion. Her power lies not in controlling outcomes, but in her unwavering commitment to her own integrity, regardless of the outcome. This is the ultimate rebirth, the emergence of a woman who is fully, authentically, and unapologetically herself. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.